So, Finola, thank you for coming in to talk to me today. And I know that every politician in Leinster House knows you and knows your story and all of the thalidomide survivor stories. I was wondering if you could bring us back to the start and to the mothers. What happened with thalidomide in Ireland?
So thalidomide was a drug that was brought into Ireland about 1959, and it was sold in Ireland under 10 different trade names. Thalidomide is the ingredient in the drug, and if you like, it's the wrecking ball of an ingredient in the drug. So the biggest seller of the product was called Softenon. And, if a mother took it, it was prescribed to her or given as free samples or available over the counter for morning sickness and innocently taken by those mothers. Grunenthal, the German manufacturers, they never tested it in the labs on pregnant rats or mice. It was never tested, so a mother would take it innocently. For example, my mother probably took it around day 32 of the pregnancy when the arms were being developed. She told a neighbour that she only ever took 2 tablets. We have many people who only know that they took 1 tablet, and yet the deformities are there. If a mother took it, maybe prescribed as take it twice a day or 3 times a day for a few days, then unfortunately that baby did not survive because depending, as I say, it couldn't have survived. And worldwide, it is accepted that about 100,000 babies were affected by thalidomide worldwide. 90,000 died in utero as a direct result of the ingestion of the tablet. And of the 10,000 that were born, 5,000 of that 10,000 died at birth or within their first year because they were born with internal injuries and catastrophic arms missing, ears missing, legs, really catastrophic damage. And so of the 5,000 that were born, there's less than 4,000 alive now, more like 3,500 worldwide. And here in Ireland, the Irish Thalidomide Association represents just 40 survivors. So when the mothers took the drug, it was the Ireland of the day where there was great faith in your doctors or your pharmacist or the priest or all of that. So there was no reason to believe. And it wasn't like the media savvy world we live in now. How would a mother, some of them didn't even have television sets, how would they know all about the dangers? You trusted the state, you trusted people in power to look after you and to have your best interests at heart.
And Ireland was an outlier in that in other countries they had realised the impacts of thalidomide and stopped the distribution of thalidomide.
Yeah.
What happened in Ireland?
What happened was that there was a gynecologist in Australia and a Professor Lenz in Germany, and they suddenly realised that they were dealing with a crop of their patients who had catastrophically disabled children. And they had to investigate because this was really shocking and the level of deformity. And they realised that the common denominator was the taking of the mother of the thalidomide products. And they immediately contacted the Grunenthal pharmaceutical company. Other people also were contacting this pharmaceutical company, but it was such a big seller. It was second only to the sale of aspirin in Germany, and it was making the company millions. And so they chose to take those warnings and they parked them separately in, different compartments, if you like, and chose not to join the dots. And then eventually, when both Professor Lenz and the Australian doctor, they published very strong reports in the Lancet. And really the company had nowhere else to hide that showed the evidence of the link between the taking of thalidomide and the birth defects. So immediately within a few days, the Grunenthal company issued a warning, worldwide warning, remove this drug. Why or what happened in Ireland beggars belief. There would be a narrative that at the time, the Department of Health in Ireland would have been the most Catholic of departments. I know Olivia O'Leary has stated that publicly. But they allowed the manufacturer of the drug to just issue some version of a warning. We now know that it was a small slip, a coloured slip of paper that just went to pharmacies, basically implying that the batch you might have should just be returned. but not saying why, no bells or whistles, almost like it's an out-of-date return your stock. But then there was no effort to publicise this warning and no effort to take control of stocks that are already in people's houses, in their little cabinets, in their medicine drawer. My mother, I have the picture at home of the receipt. I was born in October 61, and in the month of October 61, she was prescribed and collected 20 more Softenon, possibly thinking it calmed her nerves, that if she was going to have sleepless nights, the youngest of 6 children, that it would be handy to have those ready, because it was meant to calm the morning sickness, calm your nerves. And so no effort was made to account for those stocks. And the famous, a great ally to our parents in their campaign, Dr. John O'Connell, the TD, he was able to walk into a rural pharmacy in Ireland 3 years after the international withdrawal and buy it over the counter. So again, no effort to fix this, no effort.
So it's near impossible to imagine what your mum and all of the mothers went through when you consider you go to a trusted medical practitioner, get a prescription for morning sickness, which is so unbearable.
Yeah.
To try to address it, and to then have, the results of that, but to know that it had actually been withdrawn from other markets and that there was no alarm bells raised when the information was there. The damage that was being done is just hard to...
Holly, a lot of our members, or a certain portion of our members, not only should the licensing of the drug been approved stronger, but also the fact that they didn't withdraw it had a direct effect on a certain number of our members. They were needlessly affected. Like, you've met our chairman, John Stack. John Stack is one of the youngest needlessly affected. And it just simply didn't have to happen, the level of disability that John has experienced. I have a truthful story. I have the evidence of this, and I think it puts it in perspective in a very human way. From a lot of our media over the years, I was contacted by this lovely lady, a nun, and she actually went on to set up the grieving clinic in Limerick. That's another story. But she was able to give me the birth certificate of her brother, and 2 months later, the death certificate of her brother. And the cause of death was thalidomide-related damage. And as a young woman, a young child at home, and that mother, she can remember, they didn't own a car, that the neighbour came in the blue Volkswagen Beetle, and the little white coffin was put into the passenger seat to be taken away. And the mother was too, these are the reality of the stories, that the inaction, that's the ripple. It's all very well saying, oh, well, we know now what we should have known then, and hope that they will eventually take responsibility, retrospectively. But I think those personal stories, they're heartbreaking, aren't they? They really are. I don't think I'll ever get over the conversation with that lady about that. I actually don't know of one story where somebody sat down and their mother explained. And it was only more recently, for example, that one of my, and you've met again, Sandra Dunn on our committee. Sandra now knows that, for example, her dad worked for the local GP. I think he was a gardener or something. And he mentioned to the GP that his wife was very sick with morning sickness. And the GP gave him free samples of the drug. So again, Sandra has fought for all of these decades where she has gone and actually has medical proof that she is thalidomide. She was inspected by world experts, and the states still haven't recognized her yet. So her mother, Elizabeth Sweeney, went to her grave previously years and years ago, swearing an affidavit to how and when she was given the free sample. I think the indignity of those mothers not being believed. They weren't trying to screw the state. These were honest, dignified women, and they were just trying to tell the truth. And there was one very important thing. There was another mother that I spoke at length with. She's 86. When the Irish state eventually said they were going to examine and children could come forward to see if they were thalidomide, they advertised in the newspapers. This woman said it was very telling that a few of the mothers, they were sitting on benches outside examination rooms. None of the mothers were allowed in to support us. When I say that none of us will ever get over what happened to us, during those examinations, how we were turned inside out, photographed almost naked, every digit, every part of our bodies, because when they were assessing you, this was going to be 5 points. The thumb that was amputated was going to be 4 points. The missing this was going to be, that's how they worked out the scheme. And
no one's mum alive.
we're not over that one yet, I can tell you. But this lovely mother was telling me that she was sitting on the bench outside with the other mothers, and of course dads were there too. And suddenly the conversation took on, like, when did you take it, how, among themselves. She had gone back to her GP when she was coming forward to be assessed with her son. And she went to the GP and said, I need to look at my records. I need to show the proof that maybe I took this drug. And the GP was very dismissive, and he said, you know, we had a fire in our surgery and we've lost all our records. And then this mother said to me, Finola, it was damning to sit among 5 or 6 women, and the number of fires in GP surgeries was extraordinary. And, you know, I think that was half the problem, that GPs were afraid that they were going to be caught up in this and sued for giving it out or whatever. And so I had the evidential proof that my mother had taken it. Our local GP in Cove, County Cork, and the prescription, they all swore affidavits. They were assisted, my parents. And I think there's something very telling that I have to say as well about that process of trying to be recognised in the 70s. Over 100 children came forward, and only 32 or 33 were accepted. You know, there were parents who were illiterate. They really, you could almost see that there was a certain methodology of people who were going to give us grief and speak up stronger probably got through, because we see a very definitive narrative on that. And I know from unpublished files, unshared files, you know, there's wording in cabinet briefing documents that say what we will get away with. Extraordinary stuff. They mentioned that one of the children might be a member of the travelling community. Do we really want to be paying them, you know, as if, what would they do with the money? There was another narrative where maybe a child was now in the care of the state because of its catastrophic disabilities. We're already paying for their room and board. Are we really going to compensate them for their injuries? What is the mindset that went at this? Is there a word? Yeah. And some people think, and I know we get stopped everywhere to say, why do you keep going? Why do you keep going? And I know I'm less affected than others, but it is that truth. Like, nobody can deny, and the cabinet, and eventually if there's an apology, they have to address the level of hindrance that they visited upon, you know, the children of the state. You know, the Constitution says protect the children of the state. We were failed repeatedly, and 60 years on, at the moment, we're still being failed, I'm afraid.
What people might not also be able to believe, on top of all of these unbelievable things, is that the state still haven't recognised this, apologised for this, and compensated for it. And, you know, time and time again, politicians raise it in the door, we bring it up, and they kind of insinuate, oh, something's about to be done. And every single time nothing is done. And I just wonder, could you bring people up to date to, like, what is happening now?
So the state have blocked us for over 15 years in our court cases by every means possible. They have held back on disclosure of documents that would have helped us, and etc., etc. We have had court-appointed mediation that the offer under John Rogers came in at 62,500 on day one. Still, we left after 18 months of court-appointed mediation under a former AG, and the only offer on the table was still 62,500. So who was directing that narrative? State Claims Agency again, all over it. We then had Kieran Mulvey and lots of in-between stuff. And now we're in a situation where both Micheál Martin and Simon Harris have taken personal responsibility. And, you know, we were with them last week, Holly. And there is no doubt that they are seriously frustrated across the table at the inaction. And they want their bona fide to be accepted, and we all move on to do a deal. But I have to remind them, when we're in that room, we have a mandate from severely disabled people who have no trust after 60 years. We are trying to get past it, but just what's being put in front of us doesn't quite stack up to being a fair deal. And so we can't just walk away and move along with that. Like, we have to cross the T's, dot the I's, because simply put, none of us physically or mentally at this stage will have the energy to revisit this campaign. So no, what has to be done is it has to be finished, solid, future-proofed and fair and proportionate. We really think that's the case. And, you know, no doubt the state apology, when it comes, will mention the historical legacy. I really hope that that's something that they will take very big ownership of, the historical hand, act and part of the state in this. That's fine. We have mothers, especially a few mothers, and our own beloved thalidomide survivors. They won't be here to hear it. And I have warned them for over a year that there will be more losses before we get the state apology. We had really hoped that, if you like, as a concession or a kindness, I think we deserve much more than kindness at this stage. Would you fast track the apology so some people will hear it and not miss it? I want to accept the bona fide. I see it when I walk in here, like, you know, you're spending too long in Leinster House when the ushers hug you when you come in. You know, that they all know you. The people, I mean, over the week since we met the leaders last Monday, people still stop us in the street to say why. And I really feel very strongly that you actually have the chance to get it unbelievably right because we're such a small group. You know, you can actually be perfect in this. It could be a benchmark of how apologies, how, you know, redress could be done because you have 40 people. And I think, you know...
Bona fides mean nothing without action.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
6 years of inaction.
Yeah.
It's time for action.
No, really is. And thank you and everybody for your continued support. We'd be lost without it. But and it's very hard for 40 people to shout louder enough. But I think I thought it was interesting. There was an RT report the other day of sort of homework for what the politicians have to do or what might be the pitfalls during the summer. And there was biggies and, you know, triple locks and all of that. But we were right in there at like the national issue. And I think that speaks volumes where, you know, this is something that can be fixed. We accept that governments can't fix everything, but this is an easy one to fix, I think.
It is, and it says something about how a government takes responsibility for doing something wrong. It says something about how a government treats people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It says a lot about how a government treats its most vulnerable people too. So,
And you must remember, you know, we wake up every day and we're sore, we're burdened, we're physically getting more disabled. So it is very, very challenging. You know, I remember the words of Jackie Brown, our fabulous campaigner who died last year. And I think it was quoted as a headline in one of the papers a couple of years ago. They are just waiting for us to die.
Oh, 1 minute.
Yeah.